You're listening to Happy Hour Hustle from the creative geniuses here at 834. We're funny, informative, and we swear. We talk all things marketing, communication, small business, plus we offer up hot takes on our industry, and whatever else we feel like talking about. So, grab your drink of choice. It's always 5 o'clock at 834. And crank it up.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of 834's Happy Hour Hustle. Today we're diving into a powerful story of how businesses can step up when legislation falls short. I had the privilege of sitting down with Mark Peters, CEO of Butterball Farms, to discuss The Source, a nonprofit he established over 20 years ago in Grand Rapids. What began as a manufacturer's solution to childcare challenges affecting workplace productivity has evolved into a comprehensive support system connecting community organizations, government resources, and private businesses. As we've seen time and time again, when legislators become disconnected from real community needs, it often falls to visionary business leaders like Mark to create practical solutions. Mark's journey from a factory worker in his father's company to a CEO focused on both financial success and enriching workers' lives demonstrates how business leadership can transform communities while delivering impressive returns on investment. Thanks for joining us for this inspiring conversation about creating pathways to economic well-being for working families across Michigan. Okay, Mark. So thank you for being with us. I am so excited. Well, everybody knows you as obviously like the CEO of Butterball, and that's great, but that's not what we're talking about today. You can mention it a little bit, but we're talking about The Source. But before we jump into it, we obviously have to ask you what your favorite drink is, because this is Happy Hour Hustle, obviously. So for Happy Hour, what's your go-to?
So I'm kind of a red wine connoisseur.
Okay. So you'd probably hate that I put ice in it.
But
I know. He's leaving. He's actually left, folks. No. So red wine. What kind of red wine?
That's the great thing about red wine. It depends on your mood, or it depends what you're pairing it with, or it depends on the temperature outside.
Well, fair. Yeah.
You know, learning about it is part of it.
I bet you have you have a wine cellar, don't you?
I do have a
wine cellar. Okay. So I'm curious, do you have it organized by region?
Well, there's a long story. I used to have it very well organized, and we don't have time to go into the story.
And now you gave up.
I don't, but there's an actual reason why it's not.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to get it. I am going to get it reorganized this year. It's one of my goals. But if I had to drink a cocktail, so I'm not a big, I don't have that
wine counts, but
Renaissance cocktail thing. So an old fashioned is kind of my go-to if we're sitting at the bar at the hour.
Mine used to be red wine with ice. I mean, I still enjoy that. Good red wine. I know this goes against everything you believe in, but lately I've been drinking pomegranate margaritas.
Ooh.
I know, it's so random. And you don't put salt on the rim, you put sugar. Just so you know, Blue Water Girl makes it for me specially. So now they know me by name, which makes me seem like an alcoholic, but I'm not. Maybe I'm just there too much, but yeah, so that's mine. Not that you asked, but you really should try it.
It sounds good.
Yeah, actually. It really, and it's not too sweet. So can you not? So we have River in the studio with us today, folks. You'll see a picture of her. She'll be on the video, but she's going to be very annoying. So, she's a dog, by the way. Just to be clear, she's a dog. Okay, so I want to talk about The Source. In your own words, before I read the vision,
yes.
How would you describe The Source?
I sort of describe The Source as being a resource for the member companies and employees.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started The Source, the goal was not to do anything, but to be a clearinghouse.
Kind of connector?
And so one of the things you learn when you start doing this work is that, in general, people who live in poverty or the working poor, from a community perspective, their time is worth nothing.
Yeah.
And so when it's great when you say, hey, we have all these services in our community, whether they're government provided or nonprofit provided, that are available for people. Well, that's great, but if they're working, they don't have a whole day to stand in line and wait.
Oh, I'm annoyed banks close at 5. So, our society's not set up for the working class.
People that work during an actual 9 to 5 day.
Yeah, exactly.
The Source has become almost a concierge service.
Yeah.
So it actually gets people the services they need in a really time efficient way.
So I'm going to read the vision, and then it's interesting because you initially kind of started it as to address the childcare issue.
So I saw that in the notes.
No, not really.
And that's not, I don't recall that.
Oh, well, it has been 20 years, so I'm just going to say you're wrong. Just kidding.
That's
No. What's interesting is, well, let me read the vision first. I'm all over the place. So, the source will be a champion for the workforce and a lead voice in advocating for programs and policies that create pathways to economic and personal well-being to improve the lives of working families across the state of Michigan. What I find so interesting as a small business owner is you saw an issue and you went about trying to solve it or figuring out how you could solve it. And I tell people all the time, small businesses I think are often kind of overlooked or you hear about all the big businesses, but small businesses are the ones that are spending the most time in the community. They're the ones that are giving back to the community the most because they see the value. Right. I mean, the whole reason 834, the building is where it is because this is where I purchased my first home. And Crescent neighborhood means a lot to me. So, we are very involved in, whatever's going on here. So, so whether or not you started it for childcare or not, which I do think is interesting because in 20 years, that certainly has not become any easier.
We were researching childcare.
Yeah.
We actually backed away from it. But, yes, huge problem. Continues to be.
So I was looking at, because I have the annual report in front of me if you hear rustling, but it says like some of the top 10 barriers for, the working families: housing, transportation, food assistance, utilities, health, financial coaching, legal assistance, counseling, personal items, and employee benefits. So that's what the source helps with.
Right.
So what, like when you, because you don't have enough going on, you're just running a company, a family-owned company, I should say,
right.
Which we'll ask a few questions about that. But you were like, okay, I've got to figure this out. Did you have employees that came to you, like? Oh
yeah. So here's what's fascinating. And first of all, I'm really glad that you sort of started with like you decided to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
But what the superpower that we have as business owners is we figure shit out.
Yeah, we
stuff
do.
Out.
You can swear in this. This is we add like one of those like, oh no, it's a parent warning, whatever.
We figure stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we stay in business, right? We figure stuff out for our customers, for our employees, and this is just one of those things where I had grown up working alongside people who lived very different lives than I did, and realizing that a lot of times what we have available as employers, our standard health care, 401k, doesn't touch the issues that a vast majority of our workforce is experiencing. And so we did this sort of sweep of the neighborhood, and other company HR people, like same thing. They know everything that's going on in their employees' lives, and they have no way to address it.
Yeah.
And so they've got a heart for it, but they've got no budget. They've got it's not their job to go find resources in the community. And some of the like really great HR people had some connections, and I've got a friend that works here, call these people, they can help you. And it's like, we have all of these resources in West Michigan, and there's not a great way for people to access what they need specifically and get the help that they need quickly in order to help them keep their job.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, those things that become life destabilizing end up costing them their job. And that's bad for them, and it's bad for their employer. Right? And so we're a resource-rich community in West Michigan. And it's so fascinating to me that as entrepreneurs and business owners, we've never really applied our problem-solving skills to this workforce problem that a lot of us don't even know we have, because we don't really understand the destabilized nature of a lot of the people that come to work for us.
Well, and a lot of times, like another good example of a community that also is very disconnected from different resources could be the veterans. Sure. There are a ton of organizations out there that serve veterans, but these veterans have no idea. There's no, and with the source coming in and saying like, okay, like we know this has an impact on the families. Obviously it has an impact on, the companies, because, then your workforce isn't stabilized, and you've got people that can't show up, or they don't have, whatever. And one of the statistics in here that I thought was interesting is the member companies have seen an over 300% return.
Is it 300 now?
Yeah, 300%.
That's
yeah.
awesome, because
Yeah.
it used to run around 200%.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic.
Yeah. And what is characterized as a return?
Yeah, so and again, when you work in collaboration, you have to have agreements, right? And so when we started the source, we had, if the source worked with an individual 3 times, it was considered a job save.
Okay.
Because a lot of the original founding companies had an attendance policy that 3 times and you've lost your job, or a disciplinary process that was 3 times and it was a job jeopardy situation. So, so we basically said, if the source interacts with somebody 3 times, then you saved your job, and we assigned a dollar value to that, and the original dollar value was $3,200.
Yeah.
So that's how we, and then there's if they bring education in, they could get it discounted. There's direct funding that somebody gets, and that gets credited to the employer. So there's multiple ways, but the biggest number in that ROI calculation is the fact that somebody stays at work and doesn't create a turnover effect.
Yeah.
And so the other interesting thing about when we started this out, one of the biggest problems that we had to solve in the first year was, how are we going to fund this?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And so we decided that we wanted to do it in what we call it an engagement model. So a lot of models are either like, what's your revenue, and it's a percentage of revenue, or it's based on your head count. And we didn't think either one of those was a great way to fund the source. So we wanted to do it based on how much a company used the source.
Yes.
Well, you would think that would create a disincentive. If I use the source more, I'm going to get my cost my cost is going to go up. But our belief was that the more member company engaged with the source, the better their retention would be, and therefore it would drive their value up. Right? And that's exactly what we've proven over 20 plus years.
Well, and you have, I was looking at some of the companies, you have I think 27 currently participating, and then they usually stay with you. I think it's an average of 10 years. Yeah. So that's amazing. That in itself speaks for, we're big data people here. That in itself speaks for the success of the company, or of the organization. I do want, because you guys could listen to Mark and I talk all day, but I think it's interesting because this is a story of somebody that was, assisted by the source, and they had an issue with transportation. They had a vehicle that wasn't running, was broke down. They were trying to rely on the bus, but it was taking up too much time for their commute. And I can speak to this. My husband used to work out of the airport, and he decided that he was going to take the bus. Well, he worked first shift. It was he had to be there at 5 a.m. He had to basically get up at 3. And we're not that far from the airport, maybe 15-minute drive, and it would take him an hour and a half on the bus. And he would have to go back to the main terminal, switch buses, which first of all is confusing in itself. I would end up in probably Newaygo. I don't know. I would not end up where I needed to go. But he's this just isn't feasible. And then when you have bad weather, which, we tend to get in Michigan, it delays the bus even more. So it's just not reliable. So Casey, who was helped by the source, mentioned that they had a rapid wave card, but they didn't have enough funds. So basically, and I like that you call them a resource navigator. That's the person who assists the employees of your member companies. So they helped them reload their rapid wave card. So that helped with their immediate transportation. They also suggested, based off of their their how close they were to work, was a bike, and then they helped them get a bike, and so they were able to do that too. And I think it's such the solution is not complicated,
right? But
it's also not readily accessible for a lot of people,
right? And if you really sort of think about what they're doing as businesses, the cost of having a person on your staff or on your team whose job would be to navigate those options for the small group of people that work for you, you can't afford that. It's not what you're in business for. But by sort of pooling the resources with other employers, you can basically hire a team of experts. And listen, that's what you do. You're the team of experts that people hire. It's people don't say, "Oh, I'm going to, I'm going to embed my own media company in my small business. I'm going to go hire Kim and her team because they're the experts."
Right.
So you're going to go hire the source because they're the experts to deal with all these issues that our employees have in their lives.
Well, and what I like about it too is it's like a conglomerate consortium of all these companies that benefit from it.
Right.
So when you first started it, by the way, 20 years ago, which I think is so interesting because we obviously still,
Wasn't that like the first time we met was close to 20
yes,
years
it was. I wasn't going to bring that up, but thank you for that. We'll make sure we edit that out. Yes,
Well,
it was like 20 years ago.
You might have been in elementary school.
Yeah, yes, I'm certain I was. It was a field trip. That's what it was. But yeah, 20 years ago. So how did you get like the initial buy-in? Because my guess is this is what I imagine. Because this is what I do with other small business owners. Is you're just sitting around, you're having a beer, and you're literally bitching about all the things you can't solve and the issues, and they're all a lot of times the same problems.
Yeah. So it really wasn't like that. I had so Fred Keller with Cascade Engineering had done a lot of this stuff within his own company, and I had run into Fred Keller. So when I was trying to promote people out of my company to other companies, because we're food manufacturing, we get a lot of entry level folks, and then we don't have the next level of management's not a lot of people. So we get good people that come in, and it's like you want, like I don't have someplace to promote you to, but I want you to go get a better job. And so at the time, Stuart Ray, who owned a bunch of Burger Kings, and Fred Keller were trying to do some sort of a progression program from Burger King to Cascade. And I got sort of involved in what they were trying to do. That ultimately didn't work out, but that's how I met Fred. And so I sort of tagged along with Fred for a couple of years, and he taught some courses at Cornell. And I actually would fly out, and I audited the course, so I would fly out every week to Cornell and take these courses. And
then tell them how good or bad it was.
No, I took them as a student.
Oh,
I legitimately audited the courses, and I did the coursework. And then I said to Fred, I was like, I want to do sort of some of the things that you're doing at Cascade, but I mean, there's a scale of 10x difference between our firms. I can't afford to do what you do. And so he helped me convene 16 other businesses. And we met at the Pen Club. I don't know if you remember the Pen Club.
I do remember the Pen Club. They were a client 100 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. Clearly it worked out, so they're still here. But yes, I do remember the Pen Club.
I'm sure that wasn't your fault.
No, it wasn't. Just to be clear. Yeah.
So we met at the Pen Club, and he does a triple bottom line presentation, which is great. And then I sort of floated this idea to these 16 business owners, and I asked them each for $500 a month for 12 months to see if it would work. And one of them was like, well, how did you come up with that number? Because, Bob over here's got 300 employees and I've got 20. I'm like, look, it was unfair. I know for a fact that every single person in this room can write a $500 check once a month to see if this thing will work. And I got 8, 50% of the...
I'd say that's pretty successful. I was going to say, did you just pull 500 out of like nowhere? Because that's what I would have done.
Kind of.
500 sounds good. Yeah, they can afford that.
But it was sort of enough to hire an executive director is what we were looking at. It's like, how much would it take to hire an executive director to just start this thing? And we had no idea. Like this was like, I don't know how we're going to do this, but if I can get some funding, we're going to try. And so the guy, Andrew Brower, was our first executive director, and he came out of my HR team.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Okay.
And really the first big problem that we had to solve was how are we going to get continuous funding from the member companies. And that was the biggest problem that we've been clearly finding all the resources and linking people up and doing the service and doing it well.
But you have to build a foundation first.
Right. So, but in order to get a business to buy, and so this is the other interesting thing. When you start thinking about all of these things that happen in our community for people, and right now, today's in particular funding environment, it's not that people aren't doing valuable work, but who is the value attributed to? And so in this equation, my original belief, again, which has been proved out now over 20 years, is that if the source did its work effectively, there's value to the employer. At which point the employer should pay for it. Like we shouldn't get that for free.
No.
Now we don't have to pay 100% of it, but clearly if the numbers are at 300% ROI, like my company pays between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. I couldn't get an individual
Yeah.
with a skill set
That, yeah.
for, I mean, fully loaded benefits would probably cost me $150,000. So there's your 300% right there.
And that's interesting because it's why you hire people that don't have the expertise that you have in-house. So it's
Right.
why you hire like a marketing firm. It's why sometimes people outsource their HR or whatever it is because
Or your taxes.
yes, yeah.
Or your legal work.
Exactly. You know, you're not going to pretend to be an expert in everything. So when you realize like it's actually going to, I mean, it saves you a considerable amount of money, you know, and you know, with retention, even with attraction, like, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So isn't it funny? Like this is one of the things that I told you when you first got here that you took something that has been an issue, in a lot of ways continues to be an issue that government couldn't solve, policymakers couldn't solve, legislators, you know, and you said, I have to figure this out. You had no idea where to even start. But that's what I love about small business owners. I mean, to be honest, like half the time we have no clue what we're doing, but we're so like scrappy and dogged that we're not going to fail.
Yeah, and then you have these little experiences, and I'm sure you probably have a number of them over your life, but I was serving on a bunch of nonprofit boards, and one of the boards that I was serving on was going through this capital campaign. And so we hired a marketing firm to help us, you know, go out to the donors and make the pitch.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that we were really good at telling our story to our donors, and we were really bad at finding our clients.
Yeah.
And the light bulb went off that the clients that they were looking for worked for me. They were coming in my door every day. So why don't I just connect my employees to the services?
Yeah.
And that one light bulb was like, that's what we need. We're not resource poor in West Michigan. We've got a lot of like really great service-hearted people that do great work, but they're not very well aligned. And they're not very aligned with people who are already working. So best chance of success, get somebody who's working, stabilize them, let them move up, let somebody else move and do it again.
Because the cost of turnover in itself, I mean,
and it's just gone up.
Yeah.
Like we've calculated for our organization somewhere around $9,000 for somebody in the first 90 days.
Yep. I don't want to calculate mine.
And most employers don't want to.
No, but I like that you're like, let me and then you'll pay that to me. What I like too is, you know, it's not duplicative because, you know, you see some nonprofits where there's overlap or they're almost like they almost compete. Yeah. And you said, we have the resources in the community. Right. We have everything, you know, and all we're going to do is be that navigator, which is brilliant, quite frankly, because we do have all of that, but a lot of people don't know how to find it. And if it's not easy, you're just not going to do it.
Right. And so the interesting thing also about it for me, and again, this is now hindsight of 20 years, but it's, you almost get this like reinforcement effect because if the nonprofits are having a hard time finding their clients and you can send them the clients and you can keep them at work, but it actually sort of builds, it builds community, right?
Yeah.
And it builds our resilience as a community when you do that. Source can tell you who the best providers are in a community, right? And which are the ones that don't follow through.
Yeah. Well, isn't that funny? Let's publish a list. I'm just kidding. I do. Okay, so I want to read another story because I think this is. So this is Chris. Obviously, names have been changed to protect the witness. I'm just kidding. It's like a SVU, Law and Order, whatever. Okay, so Chris is an employee who's returning from maternity leave, and they reached out to the source because they're trying to figure out childcare for an infant. And as somebody who doesn't have children, I've watched countless people try and navigate this, and it gives me anxiety because there's so many providers out there. You don't know which ones are the good ones, like, you know. And so they took care of all of this for her. They got on the phone with her and said, okay, what do you need? What are your must-haves? And what's your criteria? That's what I love. They didn't say, well, this is what is available to you. They said, no, what's important to you, Chris? And then they went out and found those, you know, providers. And then, you know, assisted her in setting up like tours and like interviews of them. And then, by making that connection and doing really the research and the hard work, then she was able to go back to work, and feel confident leaving her infant. You're leaving a human with someone else. You want to make sure that they know what they're doing. Yeah. So, but I think that's what is so cool about this is, this is, quite frankly, this is all stuff I could really benefit from. But it's like whether you have your car is broken down.
Enjoy.
I know, right? Okay, that leads into my next question. That's a good bridge. How can people, like companies, join?
By contacting the source.
Okay, just reach out to the source. And by the way, we'll put all the information online. I'm gonna put the annual report because it's fantastic. So kudos to Allison, who's the president and CEO. Because
have you ever met Allison?
I haven't. No. I probably should have interviewed her instead of you.
Probably.
Why are you here? Just kidding.
She's a rock star, though.
Yeah. Well, isn't that great when you find the right talent and you just let them loose?
And this has also been like replicated across the country now.
Really?
Yeah.
So you became like a national model?
So I'm on a board of a company that's like they operate. I call it sort of a Source Light model, but it's work-life partnership.
Yeah.
And they are, I think, in 23 states. And then we've helped launch a couple other communities that are patterned very closely after the Source. And are having, I was just out in Fresno with a group out there, Heartland Compass, and I think they have 8 or 10 member companies, and they served 1,300 families last year. So, again, it's a model that is being distributed around the country, and people are embracing it. Employers are starting to see the value in doing this in a collaborative way, which is really cool. Well,
and they're solving the problems that are in the community because, like, you see it firsthand, and you can't just rely on, like somebody else to the government to solve it. Because first of all, they don't move as fast as us as small business owners do. But, you're like, I know my employees are facing this right now, and I care about them because you see it firsthand. Right. That's why I was so excited to talk to you about it because, I think that's what makes West Michigan unique is how much we care. Also, we have a lot of nonprofits here. But also the fact that, like, when your employers are invested back in the community, that's when real change is going to happen. Right. So 20 years ago, that's crazy to me. I know, sorry, I keep aging you, but also me apparently. But that's just insane. Like,
yeah, I think there's a couple things I think that are helpful to think about also is, you talk about small business, and I tend to talk about small and mid-market companies, but you sort of hinted at what I would call the word proximity.
Yeah.
Like you're close to the problem, or close to the people, or part of the community, which is all helpful. But one of the things that we're not very good at as employers is really understanding what goes on in our people's lives. Like I'll talk about this from stage, and lots of people don't know what the ALICE threshold means, or what the poverty level actually is. And then you're in a room full of entrepreneurs, and you're like, well, how many of you fall below the ALICE threshold? And you're talking to a room full of nobody does.
Yeah.
And then you ask them, well, how many people do you know that do? And most of the time they're kind of at a loss.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, let's just go through a list. Person that checked you out of the grocery store. Person who cuts your hair. How about the teacher at your kids' schools? How about the person that's running your APAR department? All of a sudden it starts getting a little bit more real. But when we step back enough to understand that we know these people and a lot of them work for us, and you've got some proximity, now you start thinking about maybe I should have a little intentionality around this as well. Right? And I think that this model that we've built really enables people to address some of those needs in a really holistic and effective way, which is great.
Well, I think sometimes, to like kind of play off of that or build on that, I think when you recognize the privilege that you have, that's when you can be truly effective in like making a difference, quite frankly.
But so here's, again, let me ask you this. Like, when you go out to get a new client, how much research do you do about that client?
Oh gosh. A lot. Well, I make somebody else do it, but yes, a lot.
You have a process or a system.
Yes, we do.
For doing
Yes,
that, right?
yeah.
And what sorts of questions are you asking?
Well, if they've ever worked with a marketing firm previously, what their experience was, what's their budget is a big, I mean, you have to bring that up. I mean, a lot of people don't like to bring that up, but for me that's a make it or break it, you have to be willing to invest in it if you're going to work with us, obviously.
So how much time do you spend trying to understand what their needs might be, or what kind of market they're in, or understanding what some of the barriers?
We spent a good amount, initially up front. How did you become the interviewer? What's happening now? Wow, that was really masterful. I'm gonna start sweating. No, but we do spend a good amount up front, and then depending on what the services that we're providing them, we will speak to like their clients, stakeholders, things like that. Sure. Yeah.
So how much time do you spend doing that with the people that work for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah.
So
point, yeah.
We all do this.
Mm-hmm.
We all have this process around interacting with our customers.
Yeah.
So when people say to me, well, I just don't know how to think that way about my employees, I'm like, that's not true.
Yeah.
We all have the skill set.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't apply it when it comes to our talent.
And I think it gets harder the bigger you are. I mean, for us having a small team, we have like a culture committee. We have like, we have a lot of these discussions, and our workplace is very, open with talking about, things. But I think, as you get larger, I mean, there's even a difference between like, having 10 to 15 employees.
Sure.
You can't know everything. So.
Right. Yeah, and so the ability to build some structure
mm-hmm.
around it and have it be repeatable and consistent has just it's been fun.
That's just a testament right there that you built something that that now is being duplicated or replicated, like you said, in 23 other places. Like that's really cool.
It is really cool.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about the literally thousands of lives that
yeah.
have been impacted
mm-hmm.
by the existence of the source and the adaptations of the source, it's and when you listen to the stories of people's lives that have been changed because they've been able to stay at a job or they've been able to work their way up in a
mm-hmm.
company because some of these problems have been solved. I was sitting with one of the resource navigators. This is a couple of years ago now, and she brought a bill
mm-hmm.
that an employee from one of the companies had brought in, and it was like $50.
Yeah.
And it was a medical bill.
Yeah.
And the employee had said, I don't understand this. I
right.
thought I had insurance.
Right.
It's like,
yeah.
what do I do with it? She says, you need to pay this bill.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, normally what would happen is somebody would get that bill and they wouldn't pay it.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it would go into collections.
Mm-hmm.
And these companies are machines.
Yep.
So then it would ding their credit score.
Yep.
And then it would she said basically this $50 bill
mm-hmm.
could become a reason that this person can't find a place to live.
Yeah.
And that is the reality
yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So if they don't have a trusted, knowledgeable relationship in their lives that can help them guide, and that's a game changer. You're talking about something that seems so small
mm-hmm.
that can have such a huge ripple effect.
I knew somebody that worked at a manufacturing company. It was a furniture manufacturer. And they were working third shift. They couldn't afford the gas to get to work. So they rode their bike 8 miles each way. Third shift. Yeah. Like
in the winter.
Yeah, in the winter.
Yeah.
Like to your point, like we just can't perceive that. We just can't wrap our heads around it. So, until you hear these stories, and that's why I wanted to read some of these that are in the annual report, because you think, oh, well, this is simple, $50. No, it's not. Like, if you don't understand it, and also, some systems are built to be confusing on purpose. I don't understand healthcare. Are you kidding me? So it, and then you just feel dumb. So there's these resource navigators have built this level of trust, and security, and that is they are so important to the lives of these individuals that the source is serving, and they feel safe talking to them, and that in itself is
Well, and again, you said if you go back to some of the history, right? And when I was spending a lot of time with Fred Keller and Cascade Engineering, they did this whole thing with Ruby Payne and Framework for Understanding Poverty, or Bridges Out of Poverty, or something. I don't remember the exact title of her book, but they made this interesting point that people that live sort of in this, you know, working poor or poverty, they have relationships where they trust people.
Yeah.
But normally those people are not very knowledgeable. Like they aren't great at helping them solve problems that are moving forward. The people in their lives that have the knowledge, they don't trust.
Yep.
And so the missing component is the trusted, knowledgeable relationship. Yep. And that was really one of the founding thoughts about the source, was we want those resource navigators to be trusted and knowledgeable.
Yep.
And I think they've done a fantastic job of that.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so, because Elena's giving me the, it's time to wrap up. Okay, so you have a book. You wrote The Source.
What? So you wanted to ask a policy question.
I did, but I can't remember what it was.
So let me give you some ideas of. So
Okay.
I'm not political, and I'm not a policy guy.
Yeah.
However, I will tell you that if our state, federal government could help figure out the cliff effect.
Yeah.
So are you familiar with the cliff effect? So what happens for a lot of people is, let's say, I don't know, you're making $12, $13 an hour.
Yeah.
And you're receiving a certain number of benefits. Well, like for every dollar that you earn, you could lose $2 to $3 of benefits. So somebody has to go from somewhere around $12 to $13 to almost $26 an hour to make up for the benefits they're going to lose. And I really think that if our legislators really wanted to help people in this sort of working poor, moving to lower middle class, however you want to do the structure, they would solve the cliff effect problem. And then nationally, I think one of the things that Michigan does, that our source here in West Michigan has the abilities. We have DHHS caseworkers as part of a part of the team. That's not a national model. That's very hard to do because of the public-private, relationship there. But if that piece could be replicated across the country, it allows the team at the source to help an individual navigate that cliff effect, which really truly gets them out of dependency on subsidized funding in order to live. And everybody wants to talk about a thriving life now. Those are very hard waters for people to cross, from $12, $15, $16, $17 an hour to the equivalent of $26 an hour. And I think that some really great policy work, again, could align those resources and the timing of those in a way that would actually encourage people to move along that, as opposed to discourage them from working overtime or from taking a better paying job or a promotion.
Yeah, because they're going to lose that.
Yeah, because a promotion, everybody's like, if you're promoting somebody, you're like, hey, I'm going to give you this raise, and you're going to.
And you're like, oh no, that means
they quit.
Yeah, because
they quit because they can't afford to take the job.
Because they're maybe their rent is income based,
or they lose their childcare.
Yep. So
or they lose some sort of like medical funding for their kids. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole anyway. I'll just toss it out there.
That's another podcast where we talk, like, because again, or just bring in small businesses to solve this. Like, I personally think, like, let's not leave anything in the legislators' hands, because, I mean, as soon as you guys figure out what you're doing, then maybe we'll trust you to solve real issues. No, just kidding. But that is a big frustration. I mean, you just see, like, well, and we were talking about ESSA, and we were talking about, like, the Corporate Transparency Act, and it's like, you're punishing the companies that are actually making a difference in the community, all because you don't have this understanding of how, like, small business works, or you have in your head that there's some, there's nefarious, businesses are being started for nefarious purposes, and it's like, my God, talk to any of us. Like, this is hard enough. Like, I'm not going to try and, like, embezzle money or sell drugs on the side. Nobody has time for that. So, it's just, but yes, I that's why I got so excited about talking to you.
My next project is working on that problem.
Is it? Okay. So well, sign me up.
I have a book called The Retention Trap coming out in June. Okay. But it's the idea that we're not very well aligned as employers.
Yeah.
and we all have a slice of the talent flow system.
Yeah.
And if we were better at moving people between our companies, then we could affect some of that. Like if I knew what was the next company for one of my employees to go to that would give them the next set of wages and responsibilities, we can solve that problem. Again, we have all the resources in our community, they're just not very well aligned.
Agree. I mean, I have several companies that like to recruit out of 834, so I would like a finder's fee personally. Pay me for training your people.
Formalize the relationship.
Yeah, I know, but that's actually a great idea. I really should.
Make it be part of your value.
That's a great idea. And we'll just rotate them into that is. Well, see, now this was all worth it. I just made money talking to you. I might have, possibly. I'll come back if it doesn't work out. But, okay, do talk about your book real quick, The Source. Obviously, you have another one coming out, The Retention Trap. But you obviously wrote The Source, to talk about this, all of this.
So The Source is a fun book. It's really the story of how The Source started. It's a super easy read. I read it on Audible in, 2.5 hours.
You have a good voice for Audible. You really do.
It's a little bit more of a story, but it does get into, I think it gives people a window into what the lives of a lot of their employees look like.
Okay.
And why it's important as employers for us to be more intentional about how we understand those things and how we can be part of the solution.
Love it. Okay, so I want to wrap up with what are you reading now? And then I'll tell you what I'm reading now because I've been telling everyone.
Okay. So.
And it does not have to be a business book. If you're reading romance novels, listeners want to know.
Oh, really?
You're like, well, 50 Shades of Grey. I'm just kidding. No.
Listening to a book called All the Ways We Say Goodbye, but it's not really a romance novel.
That sounds really depressing, actually.
It's actually a really good book.
Oh, okay.
It's,
yeah. What's that about?
It's a fictional book about it's also like multi-generational.
Okay. Wow, that
around World War I and World War II.
I love that stuff. Okay, this is a whole don't even get all I read is like World War I, World War II. Oh. Really uplifting stuff. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm reading a book called Presence right now. And so two of my favorite authors that have had a lot of influence on me, one was Peter Senge, who wrote The Fifth Discipline, which is a book on systems thinking, and a very difficult book to get through. But and then the other one is Joe Jaworski, who wrote a book called Synchronicity. And they've come together with two other people to write this book, Presence. One of the people, I'm not going to remember the other two people's names, but one of them wrote Theory U, which is another interesting book. But again, what I find fascinating about like the book Presence is sort of getting outside yourself and seeing that you operate in a larger world, in a bigger system, and that whatever actions you take in this world have a larger impact, and your ability to really live into that larger impact is much greater than we tend to think day in and day out. Anyway, it's a fascinating. I'm only about a third way through. The other one I'm reading is Outlive, because you said 20 years. I'm getting older.
I know.
So like what choices can I make to impact the quality of the life I live?
Yeah.
And Outlive by Peter Attia is a fabulous book.
Okay. Well, mine's not that exciting, but I'm reading On Air by Steve Oney, and it's about the NPR, the beginning of NPR, and like all of it's fascinating. Like it's got some of the names we know, like Cokie Roberts, and like that's the only one I can think of right now. But you also, if you're reading it, like the book is fantastic. Just came out. I bought it from a Cellar Bird Books, which is a fantastic local bookstore right on Bridge Street across from Butcher's Union. But you can't get caught up in the names because there are so many people. What's interesting is some of those people are still with NPR today.
Oh, really?
It's a really, really cool read, like how it all came to be and how it was basically like the redheaded stepchild of, the radio world. It's just, it's really interesting. So, okay, that was my last question. Do you have any parting words of wisdom? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I really want to just thank you for inviting me to be here today, because I enjoy talking about these things. I enjoy hopefully inspiring people to just think a little bit differently about their interaction with, the people that they work with, or their ability to influence things in the world around them. Especially employers, I like to push because I am one.
Yeah, and it's important. So, all right, well, thank you for being here, Mark. We will share all the information, all the names and books and all the other resources. And yeah, well, thanks for being on Happy Hour Hustle. This was really, really great. We could probably do a whole day of this, but nobody's listening that long. I mean, I'm only so entertaining. So, all right, well, thank you. Everyone else, we'll see you on the download.